Hello, it's Kelly O'Connell, author and attorney with Knockout Podcasts, and I've got a little story that came to mind that I've actually been thinking about in the back of my mind when I ran across this idea called the fifth column, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. But the fifth column is, just for the sake of FYI, a group who is inside of a society who is helping an enemy. And I'll get to that in a minute, but we have seen in the last couple of days extraordinary theater in congressional interviews and hearings with General Milley, Secretary of Defense Austin, and some other generals, and it's just been incredible. And the upshot is that, according to all of these generals, they did tell Biden that he couldn't leave and take out all the military first, and he should leave some military in Afghanistan. And so what happened then, of course, was that he did leave, and the White House is insisting that Biden just didn't follow directions. Now, the interesting thing is it possible that Joe Biden believes his own story, that nobody opposed him? Because if that's true, he's even in worse mental health than we suspected. So it's a serious problem. I don't know how they're going to deal with it, but it's a tremendous issue for the Democrats. Now, the Democrats have a certain amount of baked-in support, and this support is of the nature of, the media is all to the left, so they're going to portray things to the left, as everybody sees every day. Academia is to the left. Hollywood is to the left. And you've got so many different movements, bodies, groups of people and individuals that it's kind of hard to keep it all straight. But I'm actually going to address that a little bit tonight. And I do hope you're well. All right, fifth column. Where does the idea of a fifth column come from? Well, there was a Spanish Civil War, and that was the war that Ernest Hemingway was involved in. And as a matter of fact, he wrote a play. He only ever wrote one play, and he called it the fifth column. I guess that wasn't his calling. But the fifth column is, I'll just kind of read you the definition here. A group which operates in secret, usually within enemy lines, in order to help further a cause which they secretly support. Classically, the fifth column works by infiltrating a nation, introducing its supporters into positions of trust, and gradually influencing public policy and military issues. Fifth column workers can also influence the people of a nation by spreading rumors and fear. So I believe what has happened in America over decades is that in prominent places there have been put into or elected to various positions in which there's no presupposition or presumption that these people are going to have a political bent. And as a matter of fact, undoubtedly it's better that they don't. And yet they do, and it is invariably a default leftism. And you know what I find so amazing, and I don't know if you'll agree with this, and some of the people that are listening to this are undoubtedly leftists, or I used to call them liberals, and then I knew a guy that continually confronted me on that and claimed that liberalism was about freedom and everything. And I said, well, I'll just kind of adapt a little bit, although I don't really hang out with that guy anymore. But to me, one of the most astonishing things, everybody has a talent, at least one talent. Some people are just dripping, oozing with talent. And, there's not a lot of people out there whose talent is politics. It's difficult. And the reason that I say that is because so many people have a default socialism that is totally mindless. And in other words, they are influenced by what they've heard or what they've read into taking on as their beliefs kind of boilerplate, if you want to call it that, off the shelf, out of the box, Wikipedia level leftism. And every single person that I've ever interacted with who I figured out was a leftist, and they wouldn't really tell me what they believed, and I ask them if they are a socialist, and they say no. And then I'd start listing things. Do you believe in this? Do you believe in that? Do you believe in this other thing? And they would inevitably say, yes, we do believe in all these things. So there are a lot of people out there that are socialists. And, I think the reason is it's fairly simple. There's a strong desire in human beings to do the right thing or to do something good. People don't want to waste their lives. They want to have an impact on other people, a positive impact. They want to be seen also as good, as thoughtful, as smart, as kind. And I think that leftism, socialism is presented in such a way, it's so vague, and it is presented so thoughtlessly and kind of in a saccharine, anodyne, unobjectionable way that people naturally kind of go towards it. Because what do socialists say they care about? They care about the poor, the downtrodden. They want to make sure that there's no homeless, that all people that are out of work are supported. They believe in free health care. They believe in free retirement. They are anti-war. Just telling you what they say, what they think they believe. They're anti-war. They are anti-capitalism. Capitalism is brutal. It's the jungle. They are pro-human rights, or they're pro-international cooperation. There's a lot of things that they're for. And I think that although individuals look at the Soviet Union, which I think a lot of up-and-coming people have never even heard of, the aftermath of World War I, between World War I and World War II, and how there was kind of this devolution in these countries that became socialist and Marxist, basically, communist. The level of suffering and the level of the standard of living was terrible, but there were no human rights laws, and people could be indiscriminately taken off streets and executed, and often were, and in tens of millions of people were. And if you read the good biography on Stalin, you'll realize that he was clinically paranoid, and he wanted to make sure that he would remove everybody who could be of any threat to him. And so the upshot was there were a lot of people killed, and there was no real logic to it. If somebody became popular, politically popular, Stalin would have them killed. If he became suspicious, I have heard talk of people who spent time around him, you had to stare him in the eyes. And if you looked away, it would give him the sense that you were lying, and you could quite easily get killed for that. Murdered. Taken off the street. And these people specialized in midnight raids to increase the terror. It was the time of terror. And so to get off, if somebody was brought into the police station, KGB, or what have you, they would be interviewed, and they would have to rat somebody else out to save themselves. And so there was no trust in the society. the standard of living was bad. Hospitals were not good. The farms had their produce stolen and sold internationally, so there were a lot of deaths through starvation. And a lot of anti or illogical things were being done, and they were using terrorism to get people to accept socialism. Socialism is not natural to human thinking. We all, or Marxism or communism, we all expect and want to be paid for the work that we do. We resent it if money or goods are taken from us and given to someone who refuses to work. So it was this entire system that was fighting against human nature, and they were opposed to God. So the leaders of these countries became gods, and there were giant posters that were erected. And there was, one of the odd things about Marxism is it claims to be an antidote to everything that is wrong in human society, and yet they destroy democratic elements and republicanism. Not Democratic Party, not Republican Party, but they break down the elements in society that protect people, the institutions, they destroy them. So there's only a relationship with the party. So everything is political. So what you see happening in the United States is very unnerving right now, because everything is becoming politicized. And some people are doing it out of true belief, true believers. Other people are doing it because they don't really know any better, and they kind of feel like it's the right thing to do. But there's a lot of people out there, and this is including individuals running large companies that can't, in their minds, they can't afford to come out on the wrong side of these issues. And so what they end up doing is they placate the left, even though you're making a deal with the devil, and you agree to come in and fight, for example, against Georgia, their voting laws, even though there's nothing wrong with their voting laws. But you have killed free speech, for example. And you've the right to protest, the right to disagree is being killed through political correctness and through woke. And so this is all leftism. These are all various elements of Marxism. And Marxism it's like a cancer. And it's just like a person who gets bad cancer and they say the person's never cured. It'll always come back. That's what it feels like is happening in America now, is we have the cancer of Marxism, of socialism, of leftism, progressivism. And there's a lot of people out there that don't know anything about it, and they are at a severe disadvantage. There's a lot of people that are getting fired, a lot of times for no reason whatsoever, through woke. And so I wanted to do I did a column for Canada Free Press, but let me just read through this for you. But what I want to do is raise the awareness of the fifth column, which is in this war, this Spanish Civil War, a general threatened a city, and he said, I think it was Madrid, I'm going to bring 4 columns of soldiers in here, and what you don't realize is that I have a 5th column that is hidden in the city, and you will never know who they are. They could be the grocer, they could be a police officer, they could be a librarian. They could be on the city council. They could be a farmer. When we come into the city, they are going to come out and help us fight. And if you think about that, there's a lot of that going on. And I'll just point to Trump and put aside whatever your disagreement with him is. Trump constantly had to fight people who came out of a bureaucracy or out of a setting that you wouldn't expect. The time that all the former generals got up and said that he was a danger because of something that he said. This crazy lady, Bandy Lee from Yale, who said that he was a sociopath or a psychopath. He had constant constant opposition in so many different areas, and it was a ruse. I mean, I can't believe more people didn't understand this. It was true collusion, whether it was articulated between these people or groups. And what I believe occurred is that we've had a revolution in our thinking. We're not really religious anymore. We've become more secular, and we look to secular heroes, and we see ourselves, a lot of these people on the far left, or people that are in the left that don't even really understand what they're doing, but they're going to stand up and fight for woke truths. So, and you see this out in public. There will be fights, or somebody will be jumped, or an individual is confronted by a group of persons because they broke some woke law that 20 or 30 years ago nobody would have noticed. And I think another thing that the left is trying to do, and this is, you can write this down as a fact, it's propagandizing people to react, to not have an intellectual or logical reaction, but an emotional reaction. So the great purpose of existence becomes racism, for example, fighting racism. And so you have to do everything about that. So if you have a military, the military has to address racism and transism, because this is another great theme, that people have to be allowed to find whatever gender they are in themselves, and that they demand that they are treated that way or called that way by whatever name they want. And so what you're developing is a funhouse style of society where what seems to be important isn't really what is motivating people. What used to be important is set aside, and then you're kind of dealing with this phantasm, will-o'-the-wisp, which is swamp gas, which from what I understand, sometimes in, say, places like North Carolina, South Carolina, where they have swamps and it's a little bit warm, maybe it happens in Florida, the swamp gas will come up, and I think it'll burn a little bit, and it really frightens people. They think it's a ghost. But that's what these movements have become. So we're no longer worried about the military, and you see what a disaster that happened in Afghanistan. We're worried about trans people being treated properly, right? We're no longer worried about fuel and energy and oil and petroleum getting enough for our cars, and our oil prices are through the roof, by the way. You've noticed that. What we're worried about is global warming, even though in 50 years not one prediction of global warming has ever come true, a specific prediction. It's not happening, or if it's happening, it's happening in such a way that it's, I think, beyond human control. So global warming becomes more important than energy, right? And the military, or the NFL, the NBA, the trans or racism becomes more important than the actual league. So you're seeing how things are inverted, and that's why I say it's like being in a fun house where the mirrors are set up to distort reality. And so you're getting a group of people who in their minds, they're fighting to be good humanists. They're fighting for humanist goals. But who decided that race is the most important issue or trans is the most important issue? That's the question. Who's controlling your values and your thoughts? Who came up with this idea? Who sold it to you? All right, well, let me get into this column. The fifth column in America's assault from leftists inside and out. And despite, or perhaps because of, an unbroken parade of disasters, leftists, or liberals, always carefully lay out plans for future supremacy as if they must only persuade tribal aborigines of the germ theory. And you know what the germ theory is, the idea that germs spread disease and you have to wash your hands. So if it's and obviously a lot of tribes have no concept of this. So if it's a failed theory, why is socialism a perennial favorite? Despite a demand for fairness, the most evocative aspect of socialism, the most kind of sexy part of socialism is its claim of being secret knowledge realized by just a few, a gnostic treasure. And Gnosticism is this old movement that was around a little bit after the time of Christ, in which they believed in salvation, not by faith, but salvation by knowledge. And that's what we have today, these people in these universities. The people that are selling the virus mandates are Gnostics. We have knowledge, you don't. We're in control, you're ignorant, you're pig-headed, you're rednecks. If you don't want to put on a mask, if you don't want to go get a vaccine, you're fired. Now, this alone guarantees support by cultural esthetes, or people who are really into the cultural movement. They want to be on top. They want to be seen on top. And would-be elites, wannabe elites, groups who claim their intelligence and education proves the substance of their beliefs. Just by going and getting a degree at Harvard, they're right in everything they say. We've all seen these people. But their relentless addiction to failure means Marxists will never be held in universal esteem. Just ask Joe Biden of Afghanistan. After Afghanistan. Well, it would be great if he was of Afghanistan. Maybe we could send him there and he could deal with what he created. But the fifth column is a constant secret element operating like rust, always toiling in darkness, chipping away to weaken the established conservative order. The term fifth column is defined, as I told you, as a group which operates in secret, usually within enemy lines, in order to help further a cause which they secretly support. Classically, a fifth column works by infiltrating a nation, introducing its supporters into positions of trust, and gradually influencing public policy and military issues. Fifth column workers can also influence the people of a nation by spreading rumors and fear. And that's what we see all the time. We see all this propaganda. Now, as I was saying, America's been infiltrated for years by leftists trying to obscure their orientation with hopes of using their hidden influence for socialism. Now, this is a few years ago because people have really come out of the closet with their beliefs, and they're not afraid to stand up and be socialist or Marxist or woke, and wokeism does come out of Marxism. Now, recall Alger Hiss, a guy you may not have heard of before, but there was a huge prosecution of Alger Hiss. He was a top Harvard lawyer, became a government lawyer, and ended up as a communist spy. He was in this trial, and although he seemed like the most unbelievably achieved person, tall, thin, good-looking, and the guy who accused him was a fat newspaper guy, but he said that he had spent time with Alger Hiss and helped him do his spying. So he was outed, and he was one of these fifth column guys. But now, since Trump's ascent, or since rising into power, the left celebrated their hatred of all things conservative in open revolt. And, all these guys in the FBI that went after Trump and defied him, they didn't get in trouble, even though he was their boss. And after the Donald departed, euphoric liberals kept extolling mindless socialism, like fields bursting with zombies who trot clumsily, unfettered towards their dream of global Marxism, fulfilling lifelong fantasies of a global humanistic utopia. Now, one of the things that you have to notice about leftists, about people who are liberals or socialists, communists, progressive, whatever you want to call them, is mindlessness. They follow the herd. And I know it sounds crazy because they're supposed to be the smartest people out there, and there are a lot of smart liberal people out there. But like I was saying earlier, we all have a gift of something. They're terrible. These people are all terrible at politics, at government theory, at reading the tea leaves, at seeing the future, as understanding how things will play out if they go in a certain way. And so these people are followers, and they're followers of a failed system. It failed 100 years ago. Socialism did, and that's why they have to start a war to have a revolution. Now, the incredible number of socialists who arose during Trump's presidency to battle him like St. George against a dragon was astounding. They saw in Trump an antichrist who'd materialized at the White House and fought him like a mother bear for a wounded cub. More worrisome is the number of organizations which were once neutral or tilted a little right that are now commandeered by leftists, including the U.S. military, pro-sports leagues, large corporations, the FBI and CIA, to name a few. I mean, there's a lot more out there. Now, consider what we're talking about, an application of O'Sullivan's first law, describing the leftward drift of many politicians, leaders, and organizations and states. And here's O'Sullivan's first law. All organizations that are not actually right-wing will over time become left-wing. If you think about it, it's incredibly true, and that even includes churches. And I would say has even happened to the Catholic Church. Has become very left. In other words, since left, and you remember how the Pope fought against Trump all the time, and he tried to get involved in the U.S. election. He did get involved. He didn't achieve what he wanted, but in other words, since leftism is another way of describing an authoritarian structure, after such a devolution or kind of a mental collapse, all intellectual activity ceases. More threatening as highlighting a rebel nature, this socialist army hates free speech and the Bill of Rights with satanic fury. And you've noticed how they're trying to, and they've already really done it. You can't say certain things. You can't talk about certain subjects. You lose your job. You'll get prosecuted. To battle this, we, the average Americans, must become dedicated students of the history of Marxism and socialism in all its modern varieties. Caught up in the fight of our lives, we must be informed if we hope to challenge high-placed leftists who so unfairly misuse their positions of trust to err on the side of liberalism. Only by such hand-to-hand combat from street to street can we hope, and I mean intellectually, from street to street can we hope to survive as a nation of thinkers, doers, intellectuals, and world leaders. All right. Now, I'll just call out one person. There's a lot of people that I had in mind, but who is a person who's in power, who nobody knew what they believed because what they were doing wasn't political, and it turned out that they were very far to the left, and that person that I'm thinking of is Dr. Fauci. And what he did was ingenious, is he would get together with Trump and talk to him about what was going on with the virus, and then when he was in public, if he was asked, he would take an opportunity to disagree with Trump, to criticize him, or to correct him. And at first I just thought, this is strange how everybody does this to Trump. It seems like it's always the same thing. These, like Nancy Pelosi coming into the Oval Office or wherever they were in the White House, in the first meeting they had on TV, and she was so disrespectful. And I thought, this lady is crazy to do this, to start off by insulting this guy. Which at the time I really didn't know anything about Trump. But Fauci repeatedly disagreed with Trump, and I think what he was doing is behind the scenes he was agreeing with him, and then when he came out on the stage he would disagree with him, so it would throw Trump off and try to make him look like a fool, because he is a liberal, and everybody knows he's the highest paid public servant in America, $400,000. My sister's a nurse, she told me that he was invested in some of the products that he's trying to get the government to use. But more than anything, he's now trying to hide the fact that he paid for change of function research that probably caused the virus. If anybody in this country's responsible for the virus, it's not Trump, and believe it or not, it's not even Joe Biden, it's Dr. Fauci. And he's just one example of people that are in the system, and it's a hell of a lot easier to be in the system and be a liberal than it is any other way. But there are all of these people that are salted out in all these government bureaucracies and positions of trust, and they're leftists, and they're fighting for leftism, and they're part of the fifth column. Okay, let's get to a little bit of weird news. Oh, and just one last person, General Milley, who was chosen by Trump, is a leftist. And he's a leftist, and he is, working with Pelosi behind Trump's back. He's talking to the communists behind Trump's back. He's a fool. He got up and said that he shouldn't resign because he's there to help the president. But how much did he help him? Not one of these guys resigned rather than to go along with this horrible plan. Now, here's an interesting thing. Brian, not surprising to me, but Brian Laundrie, somebody saw him and that this could be part of your weird news. First story, somebody runs into Brian Laundrie. He's sitting at the end of the bar, and this is around the 29th of August, I think. At which time I think the girl, Gabby, may have already been killed. But he was alone. He was at the end of the bar, but he was kind of listening into a conversation, and it was between two doctors and their wives. And this is I think it's in Montana. And they said that he was kind of listening in, and then suddenly said something like, well, isn't that great that you dumb conservatives and Christians are think so alike? And they said something like, and the guy said, you're in the middle of nowhere. What did you expect people to believe out here? And by the way, both of us have a DR in front of our names. And it might have been four doctors. Might have been the wives might have been doctors too. But it was really kind of telling to me. And guy really has the touch of a sociopath. Where do you think he is, by the way? I think he is in the Caribbean myself. But here's a little bit of weird news. Okay, a guy who has not paid his mortgage in 23 years does not qualify for pandemic housing protection because he's been staying in the home illegally, a judge ruled. Gurramrit Hanspal, 52, bought the 3-bedroom, 2.5-bath home in 1998 for $290,000. Made one single mortgage payment before the house was foreclosed in 2000 and has lived there ever since. He's filed for multiple bankruptcies and lawsuits in various courts in a never-ending and so far successful bid to get rid of eviction. Nassau County Housing Court judge in New York finally intervened, and guy's wearing some sort of a head wrapping. It looks like he might be Indian based on his name. So the house is nice, 2-story house. And man, it took a long. Who would have thought that this guy would get thrown out during the time of COVID? So anyway, a little bit strange. Photos show F-K the police, F-K America, KKKA flags hanging in Los Angeles classroom. And so this is how bad things are. It's a Black Lives Matter flag and an attack against the United States, so they don't say the Pledge of Allegiance anymore. Vicious anti-American posters shared on social media adorned a history classroom at Alexander Hamilton High School in LA, California. And policing is a violent anti-black settler institution that originated as slave patrols, says one sign. And another sign says their primary mandate is to protect property and to militarily enforce white supremacist capitalism. They are doing their jobs as they are trained and paid to do. You can't fix what isn't broken. That's why we fight for police and prison abolition, F.K. the police. So I would like to follow up and see what happens to this lady, but who's the head of it? So I don't think anything has happened yet, but I'll keep you posted. All right, a man comes along in a graveyard. He looks over, and he said he was disgusted to see hair poking out of a 100-year-old grave. California man, another California weird story. Given the fright of his life, stumbled upon a century-old grave with hair sticking out. A TikTok video confirms this. The hair is matted, has stuff in it, and has had millions of viewers. He said, when I first saw it, I was shocked. I wasn't exactly sure what I was seeing was real, Joel Morrison told Jam Press. Really effing gross find that he stumbled across at St. Joseph Catholic Cemetery in Sacramento. Upon closer inspection, he realized it was definitely human hair coming out of the grave. He was stunned. And so he thought that the grave it's under stone. It's a little stone crypt. So he thinks that a tree grew into it and pushed the coffin up and then popped the top off. And now he thinks animals are trying to build their nests in there. He says, this is crazy, freaky. Scariest thing I've ever seen. So I guess what he should do is pull on it, and if somebody says ouch, he should take off. All right, another weird story from September 16th, 2021. Female student slugs preacher carrying women belong in the kitchen sign. University of Alabama at Birmingham campus. A few weeks ago, a male preacher carrying women belong in the kitchen sign. He was confronted, and then the girl a student went up and tried to take his sign away. He held on to it, so she walked forward and punched him in the face. And he ended up walking backwards and ended up falling over, and then she jumped on top of him and was punching him in his face. And maybe because he had the sign in his hands, he couldn't defend himself. But the police rushed in and separated them, and there have been no charges. So what do you think about that? Should a man be able to carry around a sign and say women belong in the kitchen? I think so, because I'm 100% free speech. And what does it really hurt people to hear about that or read it? Okay. One last one, September 19, 2021, Indiana man, repeatedly calling 911 to report he's tired and complain about his relatives. Daniel Schroeder, 61 years old, called 4 times to use 911 basically as a psychology service. And on September 11th, he called emergency officials to complain that a female relative was not following his rules. He was originally sentenced to 6 months for misusing this service. Judge said he would suspend the penalty if Schroeder refrained from bothering dispatchers, but he's still at it, and now he's reportedly going to have to do 60 days in the Crowbar Hotel. One last story. New York judge rejects repugnant bid to marry their own child. A guy put in, or maybe it was a woman. Judge tossed a lawsuit brought by a New Yorker who wanted to marry their own child and sued to overturn laws against incest. And the unidentified parent, labeled as John Doe, so it is a guy, the Manhattan federal court papers asked to stay anonymous. They realized the request was considered repugnant. Incest is a third-degree felony in New York, could be 4 years behind bars. Incestuous marriages are void, and the spouses face up to 6 months in jail. And the marriage license in 5 boroughs requires potential spouses to list their birth parents and attest there are no legal impediments to the marriage. And so, anyway, well, I'm sure part of this is that the places that practice incest, like some of these polygamous communities in Utah, have extremely high rates of almost unheard of diseases and problems from inbreeding. So anyway, Kelly O'Connell, please consider hitting the subscribe, and give me a thumbs up. And thanks for listening to Knockout Radio. And I hope you have a great night. I will catch up with you tomorrow. Ciao.